I did a course at Birkbeck College on the history of European witchcraft and the persecutions, and hundreds of thousands of mostly women were arrested, tried by the Inquisition, run by the Dominicans, who were very clever and spoke perfect Latin, and so anything you said in your defence, they would quote, oh no, some law of, blah, 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 means you're wrong. Because they didn't know the jargon. The Dominicans wrote the jargon, wrote the manuals, and therefore could accuse you and sentence you without any possible appeals. And they did it to Joan of Arc, by the way, who was arrested for witchcraft, great French saint. And she was annoyed at the way the English were ravaging northern France with their armies and being thuggish. And she fought back, and she had her angelic helpers, St. Margaret, St. Michael, and she miraculously helped defeat the English. Well, what happened was the English then captured her and tried her for witchcraft. And of course then the church, these Dominican types, produce all kinds of reasons why she's a witch, and she was burned at the stake, which is what they often used to do. Well, I'm against all that. I don't believe in burning witches. I think it's totally wrong. I know some quite nice Christian witches. That's another category I'll come to later. People that are proud to be both pagan and Christian, but won't diminish their commitment, to truth either way. So anyway, yes, Dominicans. Yes, I have a sort of love-hate. I admire their intellect, but I'm slightly perturbed at their misuse of it. Let's put it like that. And then the other order to mention, which is very important, is the Jesuit order, which was set up a bit later in about the mid-1500s in Paris, Sacré-Cœur, by a young Spanish student called Ignatius Loyola, who was a very clever young man. And interestingly, he'd been accused of being a heretic several times. This is a thing that the church does. It either declares you a heretic or it makes you a saint. And it's often quite a thin divide between the two. Ignatius was someone that took his Christianity very seriously. He'd been a warrior. He shattered his knee with a cannonball at a siege in Pamplona and was given up for dead, and then recuperated in a monastery at Manresa. And he went there for recuperation, and whilst he was there, he was given a book of the lives of saints. Before that, he'd only ever read about warriors and soldiers and wanted to be a fighter and all that, like any young boy. But now he was looking up saints, and he thought, blimey, they're amazing, these saints. Like, he did that, she did that. I want to be one too. So he adopted his personality as a warrior. He became like a really... I want to be the best saint ever. I want to be the most disciplined, the most advanced. I'm going to invent an order which trains super sainthood. And that was the Jesuit order. He was very strict on, you have to be a scholar. You can't join us if you're not clever enough, because we only recruit intelligent people. So he did all his degrees. That's why he went to Paris. He did his degrees there. And his companions that he met at the university in Paris, they all took an oath to serve Christ above emperors, kings, anyway, even the Pope. They were going to be servants of Christ, which is why they were called the Order of Jesus Christ, or the Jesuit order. But he wanted the Pope's blessing for this project. And he went to the Holy Land. He also thought he's going to convert the entire Muslim world to becoming Christian, which didn't go down very well, obviously, and he only spent a few months in the Holy Land and came back on a ship. I've actually written to the contemporary Jesuit heads in England, and because I'm very interested to know if Ignatius Loyola ever read the Quran. He wants to go out and convert all the Muslims, but has he ever actually read the holy book, right? And if so, which translation did he read? Because I don't think he read Arabic. So did the Jesuit order ever make a commentary or a translation of the Quran? That's the question I've asked the Jesuit order. I haven't had a reply yet. I want to know, because I've done a commentary on the Quran, right? And I I take the view that the best way to advance peace on earth is to study each other's scriptures. Whether you're a Christian, you should read the Muslim scriptures. If you're a Buddhist, you should read the Hindu. If you're Jewish, you should read the Christian, and so on and so on. So I think it's a really important question to ask whether the Jesuits ever really studied Islam properly. I don't know. I'm still working on that one. I think their view probably was that the Quran was a false text and that the Bible, their Christian Bible, was the only real one. And if they studied the Quran, it would have been just so they could prove it wrong. I have a sense that that might have been. In the early days, I think now they might be a bit more sophisticated. One of the greatest Jesuits here in France was Teilhard de Chardin from Clermont-Ferrand, who was a combined science, a love of anthropology and paleoanthropology with the Gospels, and he was a great thinker. And there have been loads and loads of very profound Jesuit scholars who, were great Christians, I think. When Spain discovered the New World and went to America and set up things, the Jesuits tried to set up missions to help the Indians in Paraguay and places. So the Jesuits saw their mission seriously as, okay, these American Indians are now becoming Christians, so we ought to help them as brothers, not rip them off and make them be slaves. So they tried to set up missions where they get proper wages and be treated properly, not like animals. But the conquistadors, these macho Spanish people, kind of wanted to do down the Native Americans and persecute them effectively. And so they didn't like the Jesuits, who were trying to treat them as genuine brothers. And eventually they shut their missions down, sadly, I think. The other thing the Jesuits did that's really interesting philosophically, because they're probably the most intelligent of all the philosophical traditions in the orders, was they went to China in the 1600s. And there was a bunch of very famous French Jesuit intellectuals who'd studied at university in Paris and elsewhere. They learned Chinese before they went. And their mission was to go and translate the Bible into Chinese and to learn their scriptures. So they went to Beijing and studied with the top Chinese philosophers and intellectuals at the court. They learned Chinese and they translated the works of Confucius and the Taoist scriptures and the I Ching, which we looked at when we looked at Chinese philosophy, into Latin. And they brought them back to Europe, they sent them back to Europe, and they got ecstatic about it. They said, these Chinese are very clever. We shouldn't be trying to convert them and make them all good Catholics. What we should find is the universal wisdom teaching, which is at the root of Chinese philosophy and at the root of Christian philosophy. Because we think we found it. It's one thing, said these Jesuits, right? And they felt, and it's quite an interesting theory, that the founder of Chinese civilization had been Enoch, who's only mentioned briefly in the Bible as a very mysterious sage. And they reckoned he was Fu Xian, who's one of the founders of Chinese civilization. Anyway, they were speculating about all this stuff. And they also got a copy of the I Ching, which is this amazing book that everything is yin and yang, broken or unbroken lines, male, female, and so on. Back to Leibniz, the great German philosopher who was a Christian. And he was in correspondence with these Jesuits, right? And he said, send me the latest book you've translated. Okay, here it is, the I Ching. And he was able to work out from that the concepts behind binary mathematics. Because he was an advanced mathematician. He helped discover calculus along with Newton. And he invented binary mathematics, whereby you can express every number in one of two numbers, a 0 or a 1. And this is at the root of modern computing. Binary mathematics runs computers. If Leibniz hadn't been able to invent binary maths, we'd have no computers, no internet, no YouTube, nothing. And that was only because the Jesuits sent him the I Ching. So this is an example of why comparative philosophy is so interesting. We need to learn humility, I love those French Jesuits who discovered all this stuff. The Pope wasn't so convinced, and he told them not to do any teaching when they got back to Europe. Like, just as a later Pope tried to tell Teilhard de Chardin, another Jesuit, not to do any teaching. You know, because officials, Constantine type of Christians, don't actually like the saints to come forward in full strength. They're constantly trying to sort of repress wisdom. And that's a problem, you know. It's why I'll never be a pope, you know. So, and anyway, okay, that's the orders. I think they're very interesting, you know, and more needs to be known about them and researched, and they're still going. You know, there's others, Cistercians and Carthusians. I'll finish with this one, from Grande Chartreuse in eastern part of France. There's an amazing monastery founded by Saint Bruno in about 1000 AD, who was, this is in Burgundy, which was not part of France at that time. And Bruno thought of this new formula. He created this monastery whereby each monk would be living mainly alone in solitude. They'd have their own space, which would be their study, their living room, their bedroom, and so on. They'd only come together communally in the church maybe once or twice a day. They'd eat together, normally in silence, but most of their lives they'd be solitary. So it'd be like the best of both worlds. You'd be a solitary scholar, which is what I am most of the time, and then occasionally you'd meet up with other chums and share notes and discuss, and pray together and all the rest of it. So that was the Carthusian order of Chartreuse. And to make a living, they made this wonderful green syrupy drink called Chartreuse, which is a liqueur that's still sold around the world. And yeah, they're an interesting order, and they're still going strong. And for that, and they don't travel about and, you know, do preaching in public. They just are very quiet, solitary, scholarly types who believe that, as I do, that through scholarship we can reach the core common universal wisdom of humanity. I'm thinking when I'm old and grey I might retire to Chartreuse. Okay, that would be fun, you know, because they have a great library which is like over 1,000 years old. And it's in France, so alors, on voyerait. Okay, well I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll carry on next week.